Hi there, I'm Glenn Adamson, Director of the Museum of Arts and Design, and I welcome you to this architectural tour. The tour is a collection of diverse voices and stories, which will guide you through the museum and the urban space around it, past and present. The tour begins in Columbus Circle itself, at the base of the obelisk.
Hello, I'm James Sanders. I'm an architect, an author, and filmmaker, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Columbus Circle as we walk around today. We'll start with that big building over on the right, the Time Warner Center. As you can see, it's shaped in the curved shape of Columbus Circle, got a large atrium in the middle, and then two towers rising, slightly different from each other, which are meant to evoke the twin-towered apartment houses that line Central Park West. As we move around to the north, you see that tall, thin tower. That's the Trump Hotel building. Some of us remember it as the Gulf and Western building. It was built by the giant conglomerate Gulf and Western, which used to own Paramount Pictures. And it was built in the late 1960s. It was not a terribly distinguished building when it was built. It was later resurfaced by Donald Trump in a kind of gold-glazed glass. And to many, it does not remain a very distinguished building since the glazing as well. Of course, as we swing around to the east, we see Central Park. We're at the corner of it, the southwest corner of Central Park, which fills 843 acres in the middle of New York, extends 2.5 miles to the north and better part of a mile to the east. And here at the corner, we have it marked with the extraordinary monument, the main monument that rises there with the gilded statue at the upper part, symbolizing the spirit of the destruction of the Maine, the great battleship that was blown up in Havana Harbor in 1898, precipitating the Spanish-American War. As we keep moving, we look down the east to Central Park South, traditionally one of the great, most elegant streets in the city, filled with some of the best hotels, the plaza, and many other wonderful, wonderful New York institutions. And at its corner right here, we see an unusual building, an apartment house, a modern apartment house, not modern in the just-built sense, but a great modernist landmark. 240 Central Park South. It was built in 1940, and it was one of the earliest modern residential buildings in New York, built by a very sophisticated group of architects, trying to show new ideas about how people could live in New York. And so you'll see the corner windows, for example. We take that for granted now, but in those days, very unusual to see that kind of corner glazing, the steel casement with the very elegant, thin steel metal pieces between the glass to make sure there was as much glass and window and light coming in, and the open balconies at the top and the unusual shape, all symbolic of the fact that they were trying to rethink and recreate what the New York apartment house could be. As we keep turning to the right, we look down Broadway, which finds its meandering path down through the middle of Manhattan, of course, the only street in the street grid that doesn't follow that rectilinear gridiron effect, but goes at a kind of strange diagonal and is memorable for that. And finally, we end up with the primary building to the south of us, the Museum of Arts and Design, to Columbus Circle, designed by Allied Works Architecture, and the focus of what we'll be talking about today. Well, in many ways, the whole secret to this building it comes out of the site that it sits on. It's a building that takes up its entire block. That's not very common in New York because blocks are usually very large, but this particular block, this little wedge where Broadway meets 8th Avenue and both of them meet 59th Street, is the little end corner. Obviously, you can walk all the way around this building, see all four facades, and not just see them, but take the building in as an object.
My name is Jerry Chazen, and I'm Chairman Emeritus of the Museum of Arts and Design. We moved into the building in 2008. The museum itself was founded way back in 1956, and for many years, our building was located on 53rd Street. We found that we were running out of room, and we started to look for appropriate places in which to potentially move the museum. We scoured the city as best we could, up and down, all kinds of places in the borough of Manhattan. And luckily, we came upon the space at Columbus Circle just as Mayor Giuliani at the time was taking steps to change Columbus Circle from a kind of a derelict part of the city into something very special.
Hi, I'm Brad Cloverfield from Allied Works Architecture, the principal designer for the Museum of Arts and Design. When we first heard about the project, it was fascinating, and I suppose it was fascinating for a couple of reasons. One was the institution itself, which was then the American Craft Museum. The idea of doing a building for crafted and made objects was really inspiring. And then the site itself, maybe not as inspiring as it was daunting. One of the most visible sites in the city and already controversial from the very beginning, and the challenge of what to do with that existing building in light of the kind of scrutiny and attention that it would receive. The original Huntington Hartford, which occupied that site for about 40 years, I think its probably greatest strength was how idiosyncratic it was, that it was a building of ambiguous history, ambiguous purpose, and in many ways it didn't function, and certainly couldn't function as a contemporary art museum. It had serious deficiencies, both physically and technically. So the need for transformation was very clear, but its role as a marker of memory, I think, was quite distinctive. So one of the initial goals when thinking about the design was to carry that memory forward somehow, that kind of legacy of that building as a placeholder of memory. So we chose to maintain the light color of the building in contrast to a lot of things around it. And then also to have the building be more, I think, again, a place of curiosity, a place that people maybe weren't quite sure what was in there, what it was, but were drawn to it in some fashion or another. So the figure of the windows, the changing color of the tile, all those things would pique people's interest and also would indicate that it wasn't an office building, that it wasn't one of the more common types of buildings that surround it, but something special. When we toured the building initially, there was a lot of water damage. There was standing water. There were stains. The ceilings were falling in. A lot of the original woodwork, which was so beautiful, was all rotten and warped. A lot of it had been repainted. There was so many different subtenants over the years after the Huntington Hartford Museum left that it had just degraded the integrity of the original design. We did a thorough physical analysis of the exterior cladding, and the exterior cladding was essentially falling off. So it was clear from the very beginning of the project that the exterior marble would have to come off and the building be entirely reclad. I remember when I got the project, I sat across at the entrance to Central Park and just stared at the building and the people and just considered for a long time the nature of that object, building as object, being held in the circle there. One of the things I realized was the range of light that strikes that building and how absolutely unique that site is, and that the building receives light from all four sides. We asked ourselves what material would take advantage of that, what material would provide the opportunity to engage that light. And of course, given that it was a Museum of Arts and Design, we were excited about the idea of using clay, kind of traditional craft material. The Plaza Hotel at the opposite corner of the park is glazed terracotta. And so we were sort of extending the history of that conversation in the city from a material point of view. But we wanted to develop an entirely new sense of the building, and so we explored creating a new glaze. After working for a total of 3 years trying to develop this iridescent glaze, which of course over the course of doing it, we realized that no one had ever done it, and it was nearly impossible to create that kind of glaze with the durability to be on a building in New York City. So after 3 years of working on that, the cladding company Sealay, with their offices in Munich, they did a mock-up in their shop in Germany. We all flew over to review the first full-scale mock-up of this glaze that no one had ever done before, and it was yellow. And the main donor of the museum flew in to see it, interrupted his vacation, and told us that the building looked like yellowed teeth. And then he began by asking us, well, so what's your backup plan? Which he was met with complete silence because there was no backup plan. We didn't find the final glaze, and it wasn't approved till it was essentially delivered to the site. It was one of the most insanely risky thing I think I've ever done in my career. I told my staff that next time we do something like this, we should probably have a plan B.
Hello, my name is David McFadden. I'm the Chief Curator at the Museum of Arts and Design, and I'm very happy to introduce you to some of the unique features of our building and of our art collection. Inside our building, you'll see an extraordinary variety of artworks. But when the building was being constructed, we had the vision that we'd also commission artists to make permanent installations throughout the building. I'm going to show you some of the highlights of these permanent commissions. If you cross the street and are facing the building right now, look to your left and you'll see a very sharp corner of the building where Broadway merges into Columbus Circle. Go over to that window and look inside and you'll see an extraordinary little village made of ceramic. It looks like an archaeological site from thousands of years ago. It was made by an American artist named Charles Simmons, who has been making these little villages all over the United States and around the world. Simmons wants people to think about time and its passing as a part of his art, and also to put his art in perspective to its setting and its environment. This is a two-part work. What you're seeing is the larger half, inside MAD. Look up to your left to Broadway, the street directly in front of you now, and in the window ledge you'll see the second half of his small archaeological village. If you walk a few steps down Broadway, keeping the building on your right, you'll come to a section of glass where there's a small aperture. It's a little peephole into a magical world. Look into it, and you'll see a work by Patrick Jacobs, an American artist who lives and works here in New York. Jacobs is known internationally for his magical, miniaturized worlds of nature.
My name is Patrick Jacobs. I'm a sculptor living in Brooklyn, New York, and I made this work, which is called Dandelion Cluster Number 3, in 2011. The work consists of a grouping of dandelions in a landscape viewed through a slightly curved piece of glass. The dandelions in landscape are constructed with various materials such as plastic, paper, tin foil, foam, wax, glue, and acrylic. The dandelion seed heads are made with white cat hairs I collected from a neighbor's cat called Daisy. In a way, it's the desire for a respite from reality that interested me, an escape from the reality of daily life which lies just beyond our grasp. I think people enjoy seeing something unexpected, so apparently at odds with its surroundings. Hidden in the facade of this building, you can stumble on it and discover it.
Welcome to the Atrium of the museum. This is the beginning of every visitor's experience of MAD. It's an open space where you might see just about anything happening: installations, performances, artwork. You can see on one side the entrance to the museum store, and on the other side, stairways up to the galleries. Right in front of you are a set of lifts which take you both down to our theater and up to the whole range of experiences that MAD has to offer: more exhibition galleries, public spaces, an open residency studio, and also the restaurant. Hope you enjoy your time here.
When you enter the lobby, you quickly see the vestiges of the original building in the, quote, lollipop arches. Those arches are structural. They're all cast concrete. They're holding up the concrete body of the original structure. And we chose to, when recladding the building, we chose to bring that cladding all the way to the ground and really veil that structure in translucent glass. So at night, the original lollipop columns are backlit, and you kind of see the ghost memory of those from the street. And then certainly while you're in the lobby, you see the kind of archival structure of the building still there. And the layering of that I like very much, that people are aware then that it's not a new piece of architecture, but an evolution of an existing piece of architecture.
Greetings and welcome. I'm Barbara Tober, and this is the Atrium and the staircase. The staircase is particularly special because it's built on the same principles as the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge is a suspension bridge, and the entire thing is held by these steel cables, and it holds it well and stable, and yet it looks light enough to see through.
One of the challenges of the building that we were given by the building was how small the floor plates were. They're very, very small floor plates, about 4,400 square feet gross. So we wanted to connect you up into all the galleries to get a sense of the entirety of the exhibition space. We looked at various ways of cutting holes through the floor, weaving a stair all the way through the 4 floors of galleries, but it took up way, way too much space. So we chose at the end to just connect the most public uses of the lobby and the auditorium up to the very first floor of the galleries on the 2nd floor. So we cut a hole through those floors, and then again, in the spirit of the collection, created a sculptural, structural stair as an object that's suspended in that space. So it's held on a series of tiny, tiny cables about 3 inches apart, which actually suspends the stair in that space, holds it, or I guess hangs the stair in that 3-floor opening. And that suspended stair becomes then the main ceremonial connection to the galleries and the auditorium. When we got the building demolished and could see what was there, the floor plates of the gallery floors were filled, about a third of the space was filled with stairs and closets and bathrooms and service rooms. And it became very clear very quickly that we needed to maximize the gallery space. So we demolished all of those service spaces and pushed it all behind the structural shaft, which is the elevator core. So the scissor stairs that are behind the elevator core are new, and were an attempt to maximize the amount of gallery space and then subsequent office and education space. The grand stair, if you will, only goes to the 2nd story to begin the gallery sequence. If it kept going, it would use up too much gallery space. And so you transition then either to the elevators or to the scissor stairs behind the elevators as a way of cycling through the galleries.
In the lobby of the theater, we have a second commissioned work. It's a monumental wall sculpture by the American artist Ruth Duckworth. It dates to 1991, and it's made of beautifully glazed ceramic. Ruth Duckworth was one of the living legends in American ceramics because she saw the medium as a sculptural medium from the very beginning of her career. She made no distinction in her life between craft and art. If it was good, it was good. If it was not good, it was not. So art defined itself by quality and integrity, something the museum believes in fully. The glaze is particularly attractive on the Ruth Duckworth piece. It's a beautiful combination of turquoise blue, beautiful greens and yellows. The piece almost suggests that it's an item that's been dug up from a classical site. It looks like a sculpture from 5,000 years ago. That kind of magic is what Ruth was able to capture in these very delicate and yet very forceful forms. Here we are now at the top of the grand stairway, and this leads us right into our first gallery space, the Tiffany & Company Foundation Jewelry Gallery. This is a very special place, as it's one of the only galleries in this country to be devoted exclusively to modern and contemporary art jewelry. A unique feature in our building is a study storage collection, which is very discreetly displayed behind the bank of white drawers that you see on the left side of the gallery. You're welcome to pull those out, look inside, and see the treasures of jewelry that we're not able to include in the main gallery display. Let's walk into the main gallery space and just look at the architecture of the gallery itself. The ceilings are high and generous, the light is beautiful, the space is very welcoming, and yet it's grand enough to accommodate large-scale works of art. For a curator who had worked in a very small and cramped gallery space before, this was a dream come true. We now have a building that maintains the dignity and presence and drama of many of the large installation pieces that we install in the building. Have a look at the window cuts themselves that allow natural light to filter into the building. You'll notice that the window cuts do not stop when they hit the floor or the ceiling, but they continue. They're over your head, they cut into the next floor above you, and they're right under your feet, allowing you to see light from below. It's a continuous ribbon of light that is a magical feature that is unique to our building.
Hi, my name is Dorothy Twining-Globus. I'm the curator of exhibitions at MAD. Basically, this means that I figure out how each exhibition is to be arranged within the galleries. I joined the staff when the museum was still over on 53rd Street, just as the planning of this new building was getting underway. My primary assignment was to be sure that the new galleries here at 2CC worked well for the presentation of our collections, for the changing exhibitions, and of course as well for the visitors. We have transformed an existing building, the former Gallery of Modern Art, designed by Edward Durrell Stone in the early 1960s. It had been a difficult, windowless structure, solidly clad in marble, with absolutely no relationship to its remarkable location at the corner of Central Park. I had the pleasure of working with Brad Klopfel as the plans were developing and coming to know this quirky building most intimately. We went from several modest, even cramped galleries on 53rd Street to 4 floors of glorious gallery space at Columbus Circle. Let me tell you about a few of the details which I feel make our galleries different from those in most other museums. First and foremost is the natural light. Considered a destructive force and banished from most contemporary museums, light has been cleverly, and I may add, safely incorporated into our spaces. Wonderful ribbons of light, changing throughout the day, steadily connect this building to the outside world. Although the footprint is quite small, these cuts extend the galleries, making them feel much more spacious. When necessary for conservation reasons, all the window cuts can be blacked out, but the galleries then seem so much less interesting to me, and I am so relieved when they are opened up again. The window cuts in this once sealed-off bunker also offer views of the city and the park. One can look eye to eye with Christopher Columbus atop his column. And I must also mention that this statue marks Point Zero, the geographic center and heart of New York, when one is measuring distance to the city. In the planning of exhibitions, we often invite artists to use the windows and floor cuts in their works. In Second Lives, Camilla Parker's column of flattened silver pieces hovered over a floor cut, and their shadows could be seen from the floor below. In Dead or Alive, Tessa Farmer suspended a swarm of tiny fairies made of very fragile insect wings in front of a corner window. They seem to have flown in from Central Park. The north wall of each gallery, which you face as you step out of the elevator, has a gentle, almost imperceptible curve that follows the circle beyond. And I invite you to find the single right angle in this wacky four-sided polygon. It's hard to notice, but look way around from the elevators into the far left corner. Because the floorboards there are not parallel to the walls, it does not even seem to be a right angle. Not that it makes that much difference, but it is interesting that it's such a goofy space. As you continue your tour, I encourage you to consider how the building informs and enhances the exhibitions. Look for the light especially. It's always changing, and you will see light reflected on the floors in unexpected areas.
One of the things we were trying to avoid was that sense of the museum as department store where you have to look at the guide above the elevator doors to determine whether you're going to furniture or housewares or, sculpture, right? So we tried to get a sense that there was an entire experience or uninterrupted experience to the galleries. So the building is joined inside and out and in section and vertically by a 2-foot ribbon that we cut into the existing concrete structure. The building is a solid concrete tube and thereby has tremendous ability to be reinterpreted structurally. It's a kind of plastic structural beast, I guess, that we could explore. And we explored it by taking material away. So the cuts go vertically from floor to ceiling to allow you to see out to the city. They go horizontally at the intersection with the ceiling. To bring light deep into the galleries to light the art objects, and then across the floor so you see light and shadow moving above you and get a sense that there's more activity and public activity happening above you. And that ribbon of light becomes the story of the museum, essentially, and leads you through all of those experiences of the city and the light for the objects. And artists then are inspired to install things in that slot of light. It has its own kind of character and nature that becomes a part of the museum experience. The width of the cut was a very long and arduous process to determine the width of the cut. If it was wider, the opening would become more of a window and a thing in of itself, right? It would become too strong of an element in the space. And we also thought if it was wider, it would dissolve the space too much, that you'd lose the tension of being open and closed at the same time, connected and held at the same time. We also, as we got to that, we spent a great amount of time when the cut was 30 inches before we realized it was too big. In fact, we did a mock-up in foam of a wall and realized it was too big, that it was just too open. And when we got to 2 feet, it was really something that was about being slightly wider than the human body. That when you walked up to the cut, your body would fill and own the space. And it would also allow you a kind of reference as a physical figure in the city. So it's you, the cut, and the view of Central Park.
Welcome to our open studios. There are 3 active studio spaces here, where you can talk to one of our artists in residence, or maybe even think about becoming an artist yourself. You see our studios immediately when you step off the elevator. The space hosts artists and designers daily, inviting visitors in to observe and discuss the creative process. If there is an artist working at the moment, I encourage you to step inside and say hi to them. The studio to the left of the artist studios as you walk off the elevator is where our workshops for both youth and adults take place. When there are no programs happening, you can find hands-on activities laid out for visitors to drop in and make something. To the right is a project space, where you can find an interactive installation or an artist or designer working on one of their research projects. We think of the open studios as an incubation space, a place for experimentation and engagement in creativity of all kinds. This space is nearly unique among museums worldwide, and we're very proud of it here at MAD.
It's interesting that the museum gave the floor with probably the most beautiful view, in my mind, to the public and to education. I always think those kids that do the Saturday programs in there are the luckiest kids in the world, with that incredible view of Central Park, and it lines up right with the top of the canopy of the trees. So it's almost as if you're looking out over the ocean in some way. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful orientation to me. And so when you're in there seeing the artists work on the kilns or in the open studio, or you're in some of the classroom spaces, you just feel connected to the city in one of the most beautiful ways possible. We fritted the glass, the ceramic glazed lines on the glass. We fritted it so that in certain qualities of light from the outside, the building would look more solid. So again, to kind of hold the building together, not wanting it to be too opened up and dissolved. So from the outside, certain times of the day, it's a white surface. And on the inside, you can see out and be connected to the city. So again, part of that tension of holding and releasing.
A very long time ago, very early in my career, I had been in a group show in the old building, which was, it was a cluttered building, and rooms were tiny. The new building for me was a very, very pleasant place to be working. I mean, everything about the building seemed spanking new, and that was great. But I realized when I thought about what I was doing, I realized that I was in some way trying to connect with the old building in a secret way, so that even though this new building is wrapped around the old building, there are traces of the old building somewhere. And I thought of the arches as secret doorways that you could enter and go find the old building, although I had no idea how you would enter these arches. It was an idea about it that I liked. I wanted the arch, the dark arch, like the half of an arch that you see on almost every floor, that would match the color of the concrete, because I wanted it to seem as though that half of an arch was maybe a doorway going into what was behind a concrete wall. When you have an obsession, I guess it's like, you have a smoking habit or something. I don't know why I keep doing arches. I love how they look. I like all kinds of arches. I like fat arches. I like skinny arches. I like tall arches. I like short arches. Somebody has to give me a really big arch project, and maybe I'll get it out of my system. But so far that hasn't happened. So I just keep doing little arch projects.
We're here on the 4th floor East Landing. Look around you carefully. You might not see any art at first glance. However, above the door that allows access back into the gallery, notice the shadows that are playing on the wall itself. There are window frames, there are branches of trees. Now look to your right, out that window. There are no branches, there are no trees, and the window frames don't match. This is a work by a painter named Mary Temple, who creates mysterious architectural interventions by suggesting that nature outside of the building is dictating the shadow pattern inside when it's all a creation of her own mind. As we prepared for the move into our new building, we had a very good idea to create a signature collection of objects of all one type, and we selected the goblet, the drinking goblet, as the form to collect and to display in the new building. Goblets are symbolic of good fun, conviviality, and cheer. We have asked artists from all over the world to donate goblets made of glass, of ceramic, of wood, of other material, and we've installed a large group of them in the window directly in front of you. Goblets seemed an appropriate form for the museum to collect. When we started out as the Craft Museum, a large number of our artists were making functional works, things for the table, things to drink from, things to sit on. We have suggested that history in this collection, which goes far beyond function. Many of these goblets you can't drink from. They're made of unusual materials that would not allow liquid to be poured in them, or they're of a form that is purely ornamental and decorative. But they suggest our history and where we've come from and where we are today in the 21st century and the way art has changed around us. We're now on the second floor landing in front of a truly magnificent display of color and light in the form of a stained glass window by the beloved American glass artist Judith Schachter. Judith Schachter has studied medieval stained glass in Europe for many, many years, and her forms and colors and patterns are based on her studies. In this particular window, she creates dozens of what appear to be colorful snowflakes floating down through a dark blue sky. The window is actually constructed of many layers of glass, and if you go up close to it, you can see that it's not all painted decoration. It's layers of color, one on top of the other, that have been beautifully etched, carved, and then painted to create this complex and very beautiful pattern.
One of the most exciting things for me in the design of the Museum of Arts and Design is the idea and the reality that we added very little to the building, that the piece of architecture and the existing piece of architecture was transformed by merely taking away bands of concrete. That we have an entirely new building that was created by editing. I think conceptually that's a very rare phenomenon, that a new piece of architecture is created strictly by editing. And I'm extremely proud of that. And the power of what we did, the power of the transformation, that the building became completely new by just taking things away.